Thumbs up.
Thumbs up, you're good to go.
Yeah.
I lost them, I had them.
Oh, cool. So
I'll ask them to start this video.
Okay, so.
Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to council workshop for June 25th, 2024. The time is 11:01. As we have quorum, I'll call the meeting to order. We'd like to start the meeting off in a good way by acknowledging the city of Maple Ridge carries out its business on a traditional and unceded territory of the Casey First Nation and the Kwantlen First Nation. Madam Clerk, did you have anything you'd like to add?
No, thank you.
No. Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor Schiller, seconded by Councillor Dewitt. Any additions, subtractions, comments? None? All those in favor? Motion is carried. I can't see the folks on the screen now. They disappeared. I'm just gonna call that vote again. We weren't able to see you both. All those in favor of the agenda? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you.
Dozie, can you turn on your camera if you're there, please?
Okay, can I get a motion to adopt the minutes for June 11, 2024? Moved by Councillor Carrera, seconded by Councillor Dewitt. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion is carried unanimously. Now we're gonna move on to item 5.1, community engagement framework development update. Who are we doing? Who is doing that?
I'll kick it off. So good morning, your worship and members of the council. This morning, we're here to present and to discuss the community engagement framework project that is in progress right now. This is an important framework for us to be able to standardize how we do community engagement and the tools that we use and the types of results we get. So the purpose of today is ready to present where we are, but also ready to gather council's feedback on how we move forward. And Pradeep Purewal and Jen Kuba will be here or are here to present the process. And just as a reminder, this is one of our objectives and key results from council strategic plan. So over to you, Pradeep.
Okay, great. I'm going to start with the first few slides, and then Jen, who I think you've all met, she came through the website presentation. So, and then she'll carry forward with some of the remaining slides. But I'll start with some background information on the project, outlining why and how we're developing the framework. And then we'll provide an opportunity, as Avi said, for council to give us your feedback on what's important to you. So we're heading in the right direction. We're at a very preliminary stage of this process, and so that's why we're here today. I'll just get somebody moving the slides, or do we? Okay, yeah, all right, Jamie. Okay. And so this work supports the council's strategic priority of engaged, healthy community, and advances this council's strategic goal of improving community engagement with the city. Additionally, the engagement framework was identified, as David said, as an objective objective and key result, OKR. And we're also building on some of the previous work that has been undertaken. There was a strategic communications review that was done in 2022 prior to all of us joining the city officially, but and there was a recommendation in there to develop a public engagement framework that be based on the International Association for Public Participation Standards, and I'll get more into what those are. It's called IAP2. It also builds on the cross-departmental working group on engagement that was created, and Scott led that work, and that led to the launch of the Engage Maple Ridge platform. And as part of this, when Zvi and I joined, we rolled out the IAP2 training for key staff that were actively involved in engagement projects, and then also council got a briefing at that time as well. So I know it's a lot of the spectrum, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but you did get some briefing on that earlier in the process. And then since then, we've had Jen join us in January, and she's a dedicated resource to support staff in their engagement projects. And so my point being that there's a lot of little pieces that have been happening to get us here. So it's not like we haven't been doing anything, but now with the website project launched and some of the other big projects in the brand, we're able to focus on developing this community engagement framework, which will help us meet council's strategic goal of being accountable to the public and being open and transparent. So the purpose of the framework, next slide, is to guide how the city designs, plans, and implements engagement with the community. And while we've had some success in the past with various engagements, we've also got some lessons learned from those processes. The framework will help us provide a consistent approach across departments to how the city engages with the community. And so while we know Parks does some level of engagement, engineering, I see we've got our director here, so we want to have some consistency and some guidelines for staff to follow. It'll provide some clear criteria on what level of public participation will be involved in various types of decision making. It'll foster inclusiveness and equity to increase participation from people of all diverse backgrounds. And we're actually at a very good point because some cities that have developed their engagement frameworks are going back to bring an EDI lens to the work that they've done. So we're going to embed that right at the starting point of this framework. It'll help us build transparency and trust with our community members, and it'll provide staff, as I said earlier, with tools and resources to plan engagement processes that allow for diverse and meaningful opportunities so that you as council can make more informed decisions. And recognizing that you make decisions based on a number of inputs, and Jen will get more into that. All right, so in terms of what does community engagement mean, it's a term that's thrown out in a variety of contexts. It can mean the engagement we do through our recreation programs, through events, through programming, the engagement we provide at our front counters. But for the purposes of this framework, community engagement is going to be any process that informs or involves the community in decision making. It's premised on the belief that residents should be informed and have meaningful opportunities to engage in the decisions that affect them. When the public participates in decision making, the city benefits from hearing from diverse perspectives and understands the public's interests, concerns, and priorities, as well as building understanding. Residents better understand how their input helps shape the decision, and it helps council and city make more informed decisions. So. And then through the development of this framework, we will be developing a clear definition of what community engagement means to the city and what the roles and responsibilities are as well. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be developing the framework based on the international best practices of IAP2, which sets standards and values for meaningful engagement to help local governments make informed decisions. Not all the topics require the same. So I'm not going to walk through the spectrum. It's on the screen and you've had some orientation. But that would be a standalone hour if I really go through that. So I'll give it very high level. Essentially, it's saying that not all topics require the same level of public engagement. IAP2 has developed a spectrum, which identifies the level of engagement required for different types of decision making and attributes varying levels of commitment to the public at each level, ranging from keeping people informed to empowering them in the decision making process. And the level is determined based on the impact of the decision or change and the input that is needed to inform the decision. And then the tools and techniques used are then based accordingly to what level of engagement is taking place. For example, if it's a new initiative where we're looking for ideas from the public, such as a playground design, we may use techniques at the involve or collaborate level, such as open houses, charrettes, workshops. But in other cases where it's a public safety requirement or there's legislative requirement, which don't permit public input for varied reasons, such as a water main construction project, we will be committing to being more at the informed level and making sure the public is kept informed throughout the stages of that project through all our different channels. So ultimately, the spectrum is a tool that engagement professionals use to identify the appropriate level of participation in planning and designing engagement strategies and being transparent about the role of the public. Great, so that was a mouthful. And so the next, I'm just going to walk us through at a high level what our approach is in developing this framework, and then Jen's going to get into some of the details with you. So we're taking a phased approach to the framework development, and we're in phase 1 now, we're planning and engagement, and that's going to take place over the summer. And so we're currently out, as you've likely seen on our social channels, we're gathering feedback from the public. Jen and I are going out, we're going to be meeting with staff, we've started some community meetings, and we're using a variety of different methods to engage with the public at this time. And that also includes why we're here with you right now. And so we ask for your help to encourage people to take our survey, to give their input, because it really is important that we get that as our foundation. And then phase 2, which we'll be taking on over the fall, is research, data and survey analysis. And then here we're going to be looking at best practices research. We're going to be learning from our municipal colleagues and other organizations and drawing from other data sources we have. Phase 3 is development of the draft community engagement framework and policy, and that's going to happen over the winter. And community engagement, and then we'll be following back with the community with some feedback on the draft framework, as well as taking it back to some of the groups we met with. And then finally, in phase 4, we'll be finalizing and implementing the framework and toolkit, and that'll carry us into early 2025. And we'll come back to council. We'll be presenting the draft framework and the policy and give you an opportunity to have some input at that stage. And then we'll be rolling this out with some community education and staff training. And the idea really here is to build awareness for the public on all the opportunities and the ways that they can participate in decision-making at the city and how their feedback will be used. Finally, the deliverables, next slide, will be a clear and consistent city engagement delivery model based on industry best practices and criteria that will help staff with their planning. There'll be a community engagement policy that's supported by council. And then there'll be a lot of tools, training, and resources for staff. And then as I mentioned earlier, there'll be community education for the public on city decision-making processes, why they should engage, how their input is used, and ongoing education on how they can participate. The framework and toolkit will be living documents so that they'll evolve over time as our community grows and changes, and then as best practices and industry standards evolve as well. So next slide is over to Jen. So this is the branding for our engagement, and I'm going to give it to Jen to walk you through the next few slides.
Great. Thanks, Pradeep. Good morning, Your Worship and Council. So I'll take you through a little bit of the details of the process that we're undertaking to develop our community engagement framework. And yes, we've heard it before, and yes, we are engaging on engagement. So, but it's important so that this framework will inform our ongoing engagement initiatives that we initiate throughout the year. So it's definitely a community informed process. We want to make sure that we're getting input from the community. And as Pradeep mentioned, we do have an online survey available. And so we're wanting to ask people about how do they want to be informed and engaged? Are there any barriers to their participation? And how can we address those barriers to make sure that we're getting diverse voices when we are engaging in various initiatives? And we will be engaging internal and external impacted and interested groups. So that includes staff interviews, and then as well as I'll get into the details of the various channels we'll be actioning. Part of the process is to develop the community engagement framework is to test the channels, test new channels. So we're looking at more, maybe more intercept opportunities at local businesses. And also to strengthen our community relations network. And so what we're really wanting to do is build that, I call it sort of the inner circle of organizations that are representative of various segments throughout the community, so we can make sure that we are accessing them through channels that we're already using. Input will be provided through a number of channels, as I mentioned, number of methods. We will have our online surveys currently available on our Engage website, Engage Maple Ridge, and we'll also be printing copies of the survey as well. There will be in-person outreach community events. For example, we were at National Indigenous Peoples Day this weekend. I personally found that really a great event on its own, but also just a great opportunity to connect with the really diverse community members and have some good conversations about how they like to access information and how they want to provide feedback to the city. As I mentioned, we'll be doing intercept pop-ups. So what that means basically, for example, is we're thinking of at a grocery store or basically intercepting the general public where they already are. We're not making them come out to somewhere else, events or similar situations, but this is more if they're waiting at the Repair Cafe or if they're waiting somewhere else, maybe there's opportunities where we can just take those few minutes with them and sort of come to them and help get their input. So, and that helps to reduce the barriers as well for accessibility. Community displays, so these are sort of more passive displays where we would have like a banner and a postcards are currently available at our facilities, such as at Elgin Community Center. They have the QR code and the postcard can be taken home. And so those just allow opportunities without staff having to, we lose the relationship in those channels, but it does make it more accessible and available through all hours at our facilities. And then as Pradeep mentioned, meetings with our community groups representing diverse groups in our community. And so that's kind of twofold, getting that information from them as representatives of these diverse groups, but also using them as a channel to promote our survey as well. So we recently met with the Chamber of Commerce and we have a few others scheduled as well. We really want to make sure, as I mentioned, that we are including people with diverse abilities, gender, ages, languages, and cultural backgrounds, because we really want to make sure that we're getting the input on the applicable projects from the people that are going to be impacted or interested in that initiative. Well, I mentioned we did go to National Indigenous Peoples Day, targeted engagement with the Katzie First Nations and Kwantlen First Nations will be undertaken through the work that's already ongoing with our intergovernmental relations team in their work developing the city's Indigenous relations strategy. So that work will primarily be done through that, but it's definitely a segment that we're wanting to ensure that we're connecting with. Overall objectives are going to be basically, like I said, hearing diverse voices and building that strong network with our community organizations to support them both being a channel to promote our initiatives, but also being sort of those hub expert representatives. And so the inputs, we have the survey, we have best practices, and because our community members getting that input is one thing, but we want to be researching best practices from other engagement experts such as SFU Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue, and as Freddie mentioned, the International Association of Public Participation. We're looking at other municipalities. Freddie and I recently attended a webinar presented by the City of Calgary from their engagement team, which was really informative and learning from them. They obviously have about 1 million people in their city, so it's a little bit different scope, but definitely some good learnings. And our public communicator groups, such as the Canadian Municipal P2 Practitioners Network, has been great. It's an ongoing, basically think tank and learning community for us to connect with. And the lessons learned is also, it's not just what everyone's doing, but maybe what lessons they learned that we don't need to learn ourselves. The best practices through our municipal network help us leverage our resources so we're not having to reinvent the wheel. So other cities, what have they done? What are they learning, such as they need to build in maybe more of an EDI lens? We're already learning that and can apply that in our process. And then we'll also be drawing in external engagement experts to provide feedback throughout the development process, and looking to our Environics data and citizen satisfaction survey as other key data inputs. And the guiding principles for our framework, we are looking for public input on these, but we're not expecting a lot of disagreement with them, but we want to make sure we are reflecting those principles and that the community is agrees with them as well, so that we're transparent and authentic, we're clear and open with our engagement objectives and how we're going to use the feedback, that we're clear and timely. Our communication is clear, we use plain language, and it's delivered in a timely way, accessible, equitable, and inclusive, and that barriers to participation are considered and where feasible addressed. To make sure we're accountable, share engagement findings where applicable, and inform people about the decision made and the role the community input played in the process. And continuous improvement, of course, regularly assessing the effectiveness of our engagement tools, our practices, and evolve them based on the data collected. So as I mentioned, some of those new channels we're trying, we're going to keep building those and adding to our suite. And now we'll take it back to Pretty to take us through the discussion.
All right, so now this is the fun part. So if, that's right. So we've got some, we see this as a facilitate discussion. We've got some questions here that we'd like to discuss with the council. So Mayor Remy, would you like to lead that, or would you like us to just walk through each slide and
You got more slides?
they're questions, they're prompts for discussion now?
Yeah, so I think what we'll do is we'll open it up first for questions
Okay,
and just trying to weave it all in together. A couple of things from my perspective. One, and I have to point this out because in this day and age, when we don't use the right term, we get ourselves into trouble, and it's Catesy. Catsy is actually an insult.
Sorry, thank you so
Yeah,
much. I
It's a
appreciate
bad
it.
word, so I need to
Okay.
make sure, and I see this everywhere I go, and it's what it is, so.
Thank you.
Having said that, putting on my mayor's hat, I love what you're doing, great. Taking off my mayor's hat and being a member of the public, the first thing that comes to my mind is, but I gave you my input and you didn't use it. What are we doing to address that part of it? I mean, it's great to gather input from people, but if people think we're not using their input, then they're not gonna provide input in the future. So I guess my question is, how are we addressing that part of the message?
so that's that transparency piece of really being clear at the onset of the project, what the role of the public is in influencing the decision. So being very clear at the front, and then here's how your input is going to be used, and then following up with the community and letting them know how the input was used. So, and making sure that when we're working on projects, I see, oh, Chad was here, but you know, like, where is the public's role in this project? Making that very clear and not over promising.
So Pardeep had a slide earlier that talked about the key pieces of the project. Education was key, and that is education with the public. So we developed the framework based on engagement. What would you like the engagement framework to look like? What do you want to be engaged on? How, when? And then when we feed it back to the public and unveil the framework, there is an education piece in there that says, this is how the data gets used. Doesn't mean that if you make a comment, it gets used, but what it does mean is council gets to incorporate that into their overall decision, along with many other factors.
And I think that's where we need to be clear. Because the reality is you're gonna get 100 different perspectives, but you can't use 100 different perspectives, right? And I don't know that people really get that part of it, so I think that's something that we can work on.
Some cities, what they've done now in their engagement frameworks is included a section on how decisions are made at the local government level. And all the pieces that go to influence that decision, and so we'll make sure that that's a piece of this framework. And that ties to the education.
Yeah, I'll open it up for questions. Yeah, Bishop.
Just following up on some of the mayor's questions, I agree as well. I think this is very thoughtful. I can see you're sort of thinking about the different groups and how do we engage them. But how does the city decide what level of engagement is appropriate for a given project? Like, who makes that decision?
So that's what part of what the framework will determine. There's a bit of a workflow that you go through into what is the role of the public in this particular project. And so we have some steps for staff to help them decide what level of engagement.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then
And that's the transparency, because that'll be then part of what we share with the public as well.
And I definitely think that, although I'm sure we'll never be able to overcome people's sense that they give feedback and it's not incorporated, I do think, and I've noticed this on, like, I don't know, it's the urban forestry strategy, but it did say like, this is the level of engagement.
Yes.
And I think communicating that is helpful, and a good way to go. I really like this idea of sort of developing this network of partners that can sort of represent different segments of the population, whether it's businesses or nonprofit organizations. Have we gotten to the stage of sort of thinking about like nuts and bolts of how we would develop those relationships?
So Jen and I are starting to just build those relationships with some of the groups we've identified, and through our conversations with them, we'll have some ideas and recommendations that'll help staff as well. Of what that looks like. We're still at the very just going out and meeting with people stage. Yeah.
But I think,
Oh, sorry.
no, I think it is important just because I think the challenge is always like you can never reach most of the people, you know, they're just out there living their lives. So I think sort of being able to find organizations that can represent different views is a good.
And part of what we'll be asking them is what works best. Does it work that we come through you as the lead and then you fan it out to your members, or, you know, do we have a way to access? So that's the kind of discussions we'll be having.
And just to add to that, so for example, when I was at National Indigenous Peoples' Day, I was also asking people, how do you currently, do you belong to a particular group or community network? And I took note of a few of those organizations that we might not already know about. And then you know, just adding to our list of people that we can continue to connect with for certain segments.
Great.
Councilor Carreras.
Thanks. Thanks for this, and the first stage of engagement with the community went out last week. The first, I saw something come up on my engagement platform.
Yeah, I think when did we kick it off for this?
Oh, when did we kick it off? I feel like it was like June.
Yeah, early June.
Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah,
well, it was June 1st and now it's like June 25th, and I don't know what happened in between there. Thank you for this, and I mean, I'll be most curious to see. I think the most important question is how do you want us to engage with you? I think that's integral to how we move forward, and you know, this is not a new concept. How do we inform people?
Yeah.
It's amazing how many ways we get the information out there, and then you still bump into someone like, oh, I don't know, I've never heard anything about this. And so it's always been that struggle, and I imagine in communications, you live by this. How do we actually reach folks? And so it'll be really interesting to see how we engage with people. I would imagine it's a variety of platforms. Some people still read the local paper.
Yes.
I do every Friday.
Yes.
Social media, like, and we think there's a much larger audience on social media than there actually is a lot of times. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I do find it when you talk about how we work with the community and let them know where they fall in that stage. We were really delving into this before I left school board too, and with the province too. I've done a few workshops around that and ways to look at it. And the one that has the inform, consult, all those pieces. And I find sometimes it's helpful if you actually list them all and say where this is
Yes.
in the realm of or the list, right? Like, and it's clear to say who the decision maker is. Like, you're giving input, but the decision makers are council, or you're collaborating, or we're just informing you on this. I think just people really knowing that it's 5 pieces, 6 pieces, 5 pieces. I find in the communications piece that you really talk about that and identify where we are in it, and who is at which stage, I find can be helpful. And I know you already know this, I'm just sharing
No, that's great.
from my thoughts on what is, so people know if I'm giving input, I know that I'm not making the decisions here, someone else is making the decisions, and it's part of a bigger package.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I that's gonna be good.
Awesome.
It comes back to the education piece. I think as long as people understand what the purpose is and what their role is and all of that, I think that's the best we can do. At the end of the day, as the mayor said, there's gonna be people that say, well, you didn't listen to me. Well, we received all the information and council made the decision as councils and, you know, elected to make decisions based on a number of factors, not just one piece of it. So I think that is important. I really like your idea of the pop-up going to places where people are versus them coming to us. I think that is really, really outstanding, because they're already out. They're not having to come to us, so.
Yeah.
You know, for sure. And if they're busy, they'll say, I'm not interested, or they'll say, hey, this is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know Chad's not here, but I know he does that with a lot of his, so we're already modeling some of those best practices, and so it's just formalizing that.
Yeah.
Across the city.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Okay, so we do have some questions. We can sorry.
The mayor.
Oh,
Sorry, I had one more to throw in there. So obviously, when somebody comes to a pop-up booth, they give you feedback written. Is that what they're doing?
it could be
combination. You want to describe what it looked like?
Yeah.
Sure. So, for example, at Indigenous Peoples Day, we had, that's one of the channels we're testing is to have, I call it sort of walkabout tablets. So, so we had a tablet there where people just right in the moment wanted to complete the survey. We did have some people complete it on site. And then we also had, postcards that they could take with them. We had a stand-up banner with the QR code on it, and I did have people just scan it and fill out the survey as they were there. I had requests for a printed survey at these pop-up events, so that's what I mentioned, we're gonna print surveys to have it. As the tablet might not be, fit for what they need at that moment. But then I'm also just having great conversations and kind of taking more anecdotal information and taking note of those points and bringing that information back in.
Are we then tracking their information, email, phone number, that sort of stuff?
In the survey, no, we like to keep the information anonymous so that they don't feel in most of our engagements, just so there's no barrier there. There is an opportunity if they'd like after they submit their survey to participate in a prize draw. And then they can submit their email, but that's only to be used for the prize draw. So, but I did actually, for example, receive somebody's email at the event that they actually asked, could I contact them? But what we're really wanting to do in a lot of our communications is promote the register to get updates from our engagement platform. Recognizing that's still a digital channel, but that is one way that people can continue to stay connected.
And that's where I was going, because I think it's important to take advantage of those opportunities to not only engage Maple Ridge, but the Alert Maple Ridge app. Because we need to continue to grow the base on that. That'll be very helpful in the future when things happen. We can push out messaging to people.
Yeah.
So do we have any updates on where we are for registered members on Alert Maple Ridge?
I would have to follow up with you to get that, how many
Yeah.
people we have signed up.
Alert, I'm not sure on there. I know in registration, we have about 750, I think, just for that have registered on the Engage platform, but that's different. In the survey, we are asking what people want to be notified about or find out about. And then we can activate that alert channel for those topics if needed, if that's what sort of the results are showing. They find it easy to receive information.
And I think the last piece that I would add for these pop-up tents that we do at all the events, which is fantastic. I think we also should be. I don't know how you're gonna do it, but whether it's a cheat sheet, but start to explain people how they can get to where they need to go to on our new website. Because people still don't know how to put complaints in,
Oh, okay, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And if something is broken, here's what you do,
Mhm.
right? And make it very easy, but they get to the website and because it's a new website, they go, I don't know where to find anything. And that's an educational piece. How do I complain about something? How do I report a concern? How do I so and so and so and so forth? And the same thing applies to the phone numbers. Emergency phone numbers and who you contact and so on and so forth, because constantly hearing people, well, I don't know who to get in touch with. Right, so I think these are all opportunities to tie the whole piece together.
Yeah, that's great. It's a good reminder for us to have that information available for staff that are doing like we're doing climate action engagement. That staff, there's nothing stopping them from promoting or who to call, brochure, and so forth. Yeah, that's a good reminder. Thank you.
So
Yeah,
Go if I could just comment on a couple of pieces. Great idea about the report of concern. It's right on our website, but if we could have cards, we have it on the bottom now. It used to be at the top, but now it's at the bottom of that link. So it's an excellent idea. In terms of postal codes, that's one of the questions we'll have to resolve as part of the framework. It's a balance. So on the one hand, you want to make sure that it's residents of Maple Ridge that are actually responding. On the other hand, you don't want to create a barrier. Some of the best practices municipalities are moving away from registration. We will have to look at that balance. Recently, also just in terms of pop-ups, we've had pop-ups, for example, in the climate action or last year's business plan, where we had the digital survey, we had paper surveys, we had QR codes, and we had a phone number that they could call if they preferred. At the climate action one, we actually engaged with youth as well. They could draw pictures of their vision of what the climate would look like. or what a clean Maple Ridge would look like. That also just brings in more engagement, even though that's not hard data. It gets the young people used to engaging that way, and then that creates a culture of engagement. But yeah, absolutely good point about the report. That's right.
Thank you. Continue on.
All right, well, the conversation can be more fluid if, so our next prompt is kind of what we were just talking about, but what's been working for engagement and the data received to date from your perspective? From council's perspective.
That's an interesting question, because we don't actually get to see some of this stuff. The end result of this stuff. We see what comes to council, but we don't always see the engagement and the data that's being received. And so it's hard to follow up on that, according.
So what's been working is I think there's definitely been a larger presence in the engagement piece. I think the Engage platform, I get emails quite a bit. And so I guess it'll be the balance of how do we not spam out our community, and so they lose interest in engagement, but I am actually hearing from the community too, that they are hearing more from the city asking their thoughts. So I think there's been some really great movement in a positive way on the city and engagement with the community. I think on the data received, you know, obviously there's data that's for staff and there's data that's for council. And so I'm only gonna talk about the data that's for council. I think this is a path that we walk together as to how you have the data and present it and what we need from the data.
Yeah.
So on the data received, I think some of the stuff has been great, but I think it's just a path we're gonna have to walk together to find the best way to present that data. But yeah, no, I am hearing some really positive, and I'm seeing a lot more engagement from the city. So thank you for your work on this.
Great. Anyone and online? I don't want to forget our online.
Councilor Schiller?
I think we're going in a positive direction with this. I mean, I can think of council reports that I've gotten that have included engaged MR data that is useful to see, and I think especially consistently using that will sort of help us as we move forward. Yeah, there are times definitely where I kind of wish I could see specific comments, and I don't know how much work it is, so it's just for consideration whether it's worth doing. But you know, if we are engaging, and you know, we often get the summarized data, but even if it could just be attached in an appendix that somebody could look at it if they wanted to. Because I just find sometimes the very specific comments will kind of twig a thought about, you know, it might be quite an individual experience, but it might also speak to something that I'll think as a counselor, oh, like I do want to ask about that, and it just wasn't on my radar. And when it's rolled up to a higher level, sometimes you use that.
Sometimes, depending on the purpose of the initiative and the type of input you're getting back, it's sometimes rolled up for anonymity, but there's definitely opportunity to consider that.
Fair, yeah.
Okay, Councilor Youssef, did your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'll weigh in. What's been working for me is seeing much more engagement on the part of staff to be out there, not only present at events, but even outside of main events and Memorial Peace Park. There seems to be a spirit all around within the current staff culture of engaging with the community. So that works very well, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the individuals who take the time to talk to people and to learn of their issues, concerns, and take their feedback. And honestly, in most cases, I've seen that feedback coming back as positive for what staff are doing. I would like to, when we talk about what can be improved, really there's not much there, because we're already kind of covering the broad spectrum of mediums available to us to be able to reach our constituents and our residents, be it online, through the newspaper, as you said. I've even heard ads on the radio for economic development, which is rather refreshing that I hear Maple Ridge being mentioned on the radio while I'm driving. It's like, yay, we're out there, we're getting the word out. So improvement side, I would say just keep doing what you're doing. It'll take a little bit of time before we start really captivating the audience and building that base whereby we can then have that dialogue and be able to disseminate information in a much more effective way. What is important to me is actually quantifying the feedback that we are receiving from our residents. Being able to, much like what was done, for example, with the tax proposal, that we were seeing how many people were in favor, how many people were not, and where they were. In this example, the 3% that was mentioned, that was important to me to see and to be able to also speak to the feedback, not only to myself, but it also demonstrated to the residents that their voices are heard, that when they fill out a survey, it goes somewhere. It's not just a formality that they do and it's lost in the ether. Any further consideration at this point? I will stand down and I'll say it again. Staff have been doing a really good job of getting the word out and engaging with the community. I encourage them to continue doing what they're doing and let time come up with the audience and build that base. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Not seeing any other comments?
Okay, our next slide is about, Councillor Youssef kind of led us there, but what can be improved from your perspective?
Well, I've given you my thing. I think that, again, I'm gonna keep coming back to this. We have to try and get away from the notion that if you see something, report it to social media. Cause that's not gonna go anywhere. And that's why I keep coming back to report a concern. The more people that can figure that out, the easier it becomes. You know, if you're going to individual counselors, or if you're going to, hey, I saw this online on Facebook, and then we're running around trying to figure out where it was you saw it because there were not a lot of details on it. It just makes it a lot more difficult. And I think the positive side, I want to be positive here, is the city had been extremely responsive to issues that are out on the streets, broken pieces of equipment, broken this, broken that. Pretty good at responding to it. And I don't know that we actually get credit for that. So I think there's that opportunity to tie that together, that whatever you see, here's where you go. And you know, like I finally got people to stop sending me messengers or putting on my Facebook stuff, because I don't respond to things like there, and I won't get into debates on social media. And it's not the right venue, so we've got to retrain people as to how, if you want something fixed or if something that's a concern, you know, here's what you can do. And I'll give you one example that I saw. Was somebody was complaining about a garbage container at Jerry Salina Park that was overturned and garbage was everywhere.
Yeah.
And so now you had a whole big thread about, oh my gosh, there's garbage everywhere.
Yeah.
But nobody's actually reporting it. You know, a whole bunch of people now are starting to jump in and going, have you reported this to the city? We're starting to see that a lot. So that tells me that the message is getting out. Just tell the city and we'll get it fixed. So I think we need to keep up with that part of it.
Yeah, we agree, and so with the new website, we've got now the centralized report of concern form, there's a few fixes we need, and so then once that's done, we're gonna be doing a big campaign push. And so then, like you said, residents will start commenting themselves in those Facebook groups, well, you should be reporting it, the city's, here you go, report a concern, so that's the goal.
Okay, did you have your hand up? Okay. Dr. Carreras, it's your turn.
Thanks. You had the 5 sort of key platforms that we're trying to achieve and those values that we're looking for, and one of them was accessibility. And I think as our community becomes more diverse, we're gonna have to look at translation and different language And are there ways, especially for people that have sight, can we do a verbal engagement with them? Can we read out what's on there, which I know the new website has some good accessibility, but I think that's something we're really gonna have to look at is if accessibility is a core principle or value of our communications, then we have to make sure that we're looking at those different ways. And then I think what we can do also a little bit better is telling our story. And I mean, that's always evolving, but I look at like a simple like taxes, 6.5 seems like such a mountain of tax, but when you look at the Lower Mainland, we're actually at the bottom, like 4 or 5. And so there were some other cities, Langley Township within when they were telling their story about their taxes and letting people know that they had the graph and highlighted where they fell and where the average was. And for us, that was actually a good story to tell because we were near the bottom. And so it's a simple visual that people could see it. So I think that's something that we continue to work on, all of us, even on our own socials, is how do we do a better job of telling our story in a good way, in an easy way with graphics, because it's a 30-second world now.
Absolutely.
It's a headline world,
Yeah.
so graphics are always good, so yeah, just, thank you.
Noted. We had included some of those graphics in some of our messaging, but I think you're right, we can make it more prominent and consistent.
Yeah.
Have to do it.
So not to keep belaboring the report of concern, but following up on what the mayor says, like if I look on our website, Nat, I don't know that people look at the front page and you have to scroll down to find the I want to.
Yeah.
So if we really want people to stop contacting individual counselors and social media and messaging us and texting us, that's the best way, because then we can say, if they do, go to our website, it's on, as soon as you click on the website, it's there. I mean, it is on the first page, but you have to scroll down. So if they're looking at the top at all the different headlines, they're not gonna click through all of those. If it's front and center, they're more inclined to use it.
It's good feedback, thank you.
Yeah.
We are making some improvements to our homepage, based on some of the survey data that we're getting through the website, and so we'll
Yeah,
follow that.
and I mean, I get it's wonderful, don't get me wrong, it's the website is amazing. It has some great information, it's just you still have to navigate through, and as people get more used to it, they'll learn that if you want anything to do with city council, you're going under your government. If you want anything to do with Parks and Rec, obviously you're gonna go under that, but when it comes to that, because that's the number one thing that people, garbage, potholes.
Yes.
That's great.
And one of the challenges we have is because we're trying to make the site mobile friendly, so we have to,
Right.
And we're working through some of that, but thank you, we've noted.
So what I actually think would be a good idea, if we were able to standardize it. We should all have on our social media, our messenger, a response that says, if you wish to report a concern, click this link, which takes you directly to I want to.
Yeah.
And then we should put that in our emails, on our social media channels. And it just takes you directly to that point right there.
Yeah.
Right, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that idea with the embedding it in our emails.
Yeah, because I get an automatic reply, so in the automatic reply, if it comes through City Hall, then it's on there.
The other thing, and it bears maybe a conversation about how we do this. I know we saw some comments when the website actually went up. And there was some frustration because they couldn't find the individual staff members.
Yes.
Because they wanted to deal with one staff member. And there's a reason why we switched that. Because that one staff member maybe doesn't work here anymore, and then your request goes away. Or it gets hidden, or if that person's on vacation, they don't see it. So I think there's an opportunity to explain the centralized process. Because when it goes centralized, now you have many eyes on the same thing. And we also get to see it too. So then it's easy for us to follow up with Scott. For instance, hey, I saw this email came in, where are we with that? Right, rather than it just, again, being disseminated to different, one person here or one person there, and it gets lost. That's the old way. We need to change that. We need people to understand.
Yeah, no, that's, I think we could put some messaging on the actual page, explaining the rationale for the change.
Yeah. Anybody else? Nobody else? All right,
Could I just add on that? So on the website, I did find a user testing because people search for information in different ways. So we are trying to address the menu navigation. Some people just hover, some people click, click, click. Some people just use the search field. And so we're trying to improve the menu structure, but also putting in more keywords on our pages. Every time we've let our departments know, anytime somebody says they can't find something, it's important to ask, what did they search if they are using the search field? And then we add that as a keyword on the page. So next time they search it, it will pop up. That's within the site. And then the report of concern, it did come up quite often being a face at an event. It's like, hey, I'm just going to tell you about the issues that, some of the challenges I've been having. And so report of concern did come up a lot. I had a lot of the brochures at the home show and I thought, okay, I should bring these to this event, to this type of event. At one point, I was even just drawing on the back of the postcard where the location of the link is in our homepage. So I think it is definitely a value added, those events to always have something.
Okay, so just mindful of the time, and we can probably cover the last two questions together because our conversation's been fairly fluid. So just the opportunity for council, any other considerations and what's important to you as we develop this framework.
I think my comments are pretty straightforward. It's about improving communication. And I think we've done a fabulous job. Let's give credit where credit is due. So now it's about fine tuning and tweaking to make sure that the message is getting through to our intended audience. That's what's important to me. And I'll bring up the tax increase, right? We're so used to, from last year, we changed some of the way we did things. It's how we communicate was way too technical and people aren't getting it. So we need to make sure that that's what's important to me, is the message we're sending out is fairly easy to understand. We don't, I'll put it to you this way. 2 weeks ago, we had Fortis present to us and we had Hydro present to us. Fortis sent PR people. Hydro sent technical people. And you saw that in the way that they were presenting to us, the difference, right? So there's the opportunity here. So I'll leave it at that. But I think you guys are doing a fabulous job. We are owning most of our narrative. And it's a process to continuously going there. So keep up that good work. Anybody else? Judy?
You mentioned the narrative, so I think that's the most important piece because people read things on Facebook, they read things in the media, and they don't have the full story. They have a little piece of the story, and so if we have the opportunity to present the city's narrative, which is important, so that people have the facts, and it is getting out there. I see it all the time in different, avenues that I'm, whether it's Facebook or Instagram, wherever it is, it's out there. So it's just keeping that going because the narrative is important.
Maybe just add one thing too. I think it is sort of outside this conversation, but one way that I think that we're engaging and where we are doing a great job is the responses that staff are giving upstairs. Like when an email comes into mayor and council, that's ultimately replied to by staff, and I think we're doing a really good job there. The responses are timely and they provide a lot of detail, and it just gives me a lot of confidence if somebody has an issue of like, I just had that email address, like Ken, and like, this is where you want to take it, this is where you're gonna get definitive answer, and I think that's being very open.
That's credit to Scott's team, so.
Any other question on that? Is council's preference to give out the council email address or the report of concern? Because the report of concern is intended to move away from direct complaints going to council and more disseminated to staff and track.
In my mind, they are two different things, you know, reporting a concern is like, there's a pothole. It doesn't, I'm sort of thinking again, of sort of other issues where people, you know, are looking for permits or updates on things, and it's not reporting a concern, it's asking a question.
Right.
And that's what I use the mayor and council email address for, because then I know that no matter what department it ultimately needs to go to, it will get where it needs to go, but it is separate from reporting a concern.
But I think they're the preference to encourage people to use the mayor and council email.
Yes.
Because if you're not, and then we see it all the time, we each get an individual email. That's the same email, but they're sent to individually. So now, you know, you're maybe getting 7 responses, maybe there's 7 different responses. We don't know. So it's important for the folks to understand that if you do want to send, the best thing to do is mayor and council, because then we all see it and staff see it right away. And they're able to formulate a response to it. We have to go digging, so now you're gonna have 7 people calling up 7 different staff members going, well, what's this all about? Right, when we don't need to do that, so it's about being more efficient. And the piece that's missing is, I do see a lot of comments that, well, I sent it to the mayor, but his executive assistant responded to me. Right, I don't know how you get around that, because a lot of these are technical answers that you do have to go back to staff and say, well, where are we with this? What's the background on that, right? So it's more efficient because you're not bypassing a step, but you're getting it straight from where it's supposed to be. If 3 or 4 people give different answers, that's where we start to go a little wonky, because they're not necessarily the entire answer. So I'd rather that we have an answer that is the right answer, formulated with the right information, and not compounding even more, because we're only pieces of the puzzle are being shown. So I would say mayor and council is the way to go. Okay, anybody else?
Just on that report of concern, we have consolidated the form across the city, so there are a number of, like, all the departments and all the different topics are in there. So it's not only operations now, we're trying, and I think to Pradeep's point, once we're refining the tool and doing a bit of promotion, and sometimes it's reported compliment, we're trying to let people know about it as well, not always a concern, but sometimes it's maybe more programmatic as an acute issue, like there's a pothole, but also there was a person on the weekend that had a concern with the visibility of parking spots. So sometimes it's can be broader issues as well, and bringing those in through a central point can also be important too.
Great, I'm just gonna guess, we're gonna, are there
Yeah, no, I'm
questions
not
that
seeing
are
any
not
other
up, because I know
comments.
there's another item as well, so just quickly on next steps, so we're here, as we mentioned earlier, we're doing public engagement, and then we're gonna come back to council with the draft framework in winter.
Perfect,
Thanks.
thank you. All right, great, we're gonna move on to item 5.2, energy specialist update. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Are you the energy specialist?
It's my pleasure to actually introduce Mr. Sam Gu, the city's first energy specialist, who joined us in March. Mr. Gu's position is funded 50% through BC Hydro through their commercial energy manager program. So Mr. Gu is here to present information to you today on the work he's advancing for energy performance studies across our city facilities, and which will help us set energy performance targets and then ultimately inform the work to create a strategic energy management plan for city facilities, and of course, in alignment with 5% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sam.
Before you actually jump to that, it would be helpful for council to understand what makes an energy specialist, an energy specialist? Like, where, is this something you go to school for? Is this something you just pick up and tinker along with screwdrivers and stuff, or like, how do we get to the part that you're gonna be educating us on all of this? Where did that specialty come from?
Thank you. So this is a post-secondary educational program. Is it a master's in energy management?
Yeah.
Okay.
That is his background.
Okay,
Thank you for the introduction. So, good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Sam Wu. I'm here to discuss our facilities energy team's job responsibilities, our upcoming projects, and how they align with our long-term greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So here's our major job responsibilities. So firstly, we're going to analyze each facility's energy performance in order to create a baseline level for each of them, to further prioritize projects and to improve their energy performance. And we're also going to conduct energy audits to reduce their energy bills. And like Valerie said before, we need to develop a strategic energy management plan in order to improve each building's energy performance. And we're also going to collaborate with different departments if necessary to implement our energy related projects. So my job is half funded by BC Hydro. They offer 50% of my salary. I'm required to achieve an annual energy reduction, which helps us to meet our long-term greenhouse gas goals. Another partnership is with FortisBC. For example, right now, we're conducting an energy study for our corporate buildings. 12 corporate buildings will be included in this study with FortisBC. And the cost of this project is around $64,000, and FortisBC will provide 80% of that cost. So our city has set a strategic greenhouse gas emission reduction target. That means by 2030, we need to reduce our emission by 45%, and hopefully to be net zero by 2050. So that's all based on 2010's level. So my goal here is to help achieve those goals on the corporate building side. So this chart here clearly shows where we're at in terms of energy consumption compared to other cities. The green bar here is us. So as you can see, the city of Maple Ridge is exactly at the medium level among other cities. The orange line here is our 2030s target, which is 45% of reduction.
what's happening in Poco?
Yeah, we don't know what other cities are doing, but obviously we're better than them, right?
I don't know if that's a right word to you.
Oh, sorry. Any questions?
For another time, it would be interesting to understand why those energy consumptions are a lot higher. I don't wanna speculate, but I suspect it, yeah. So it would be interesting to find out
Yeah.
why there's
Sure.
such a huge variance there.
Yeah.
Victoria.
Okay, so this chart here shows our corporate buildings energy consumption. The blue bars here are the consumptions in 2022, and orange bars are the ones last year. So my goal here is to reduce those orange bars in the following years so that we can meet our long-term greenhouse gas emission targets. So our next steps will be keeping analyzing each building's energy performance in order to prioritize projects, to set baseline level for each of them, to develop facility strategic energy management plan, We're going to ensure that life cycle replacement projects will be energy efficient as well. So here's our current projects. The first one is our tower lighting upgrade. So all the parquet and the exterior lamps will be upgraded to LEDs. We're going to do the same thing for the senior society. For this VC building studies ongoing. Top 5 gas consuming buildings will be identified, and we're going to propose energy conservation measures. Like I said before, we will ensure that energy-related life cycle replacement will be energy efficient. For example, these rooftop heating and cooling replacement projects. A little bit math here for our tower lighting project. We will save about $10,000 per year. That's equal to 154,000 kilowatt hours. The total cost of this project is around $140,000. BC Hydro gives us $40,000 for that, so basically a quarter of the total price. The rest 2 projects are ongoing and will be announced when they are completed. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, and please feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, congratulations on your first presentation.
Thank you.
Interesting, absolutely, and for those of us that were on the task force, Mayor's Task Force for Climate Action, we actually talked about it quite a bit, had numerous meetings with Fortis where they offer to fund certain projects, and glad to see that Hydro is stepping up as well. I love what we're doing. I think there's an opportunity. We need to shout this out. Between yourself and Brian, people don't know what we're doing. This is an absolute win. And I think there's an opportunity, and too bad our comms team are gone. But this is an opportunity. Oh, there. It's an opportunity to explain how did we get here. So the fact that we're not paying for a lot of this stuff, that it's subsidized. 2, what is the end result? Why are we doing this? Why did we bring a new climate liaison person in? Why did we bring yourself in? What are the advantages to that? And in this day and age about affordability, if you can save $10,000 off one building, what can we save off of all of our buildings? Right, so I think there's an opportunity here, and we need to shout that out. So I'll stop right there and open it up for any other questions. Sunny.
Thank you, and Sam, I'm glad you're here, and I'm very interested in this work, and so I guess what I'm just wondering is you're out there, you're looking at what's going on right now, and you're developing a plan. Once you have the information, who ultimately makes recommendations about moving forward? Like, is it yourself that determines this is the best way to reduce emissions here, or are Fortis and BC Hydro involved in that conversation? Can you just explain to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I will work with certified energy engineers from the consulting companies like ClearRest, like Prism, to propose any energy conservation measures so that we can make sure that all the conservation projects will be energy efficient and it will work towards our long-term greenhouse gas goals. And also, I will keep Fortis BC and BC Hydro to be informed about our conservation measures. So yeah, it's like a working together mechanism between me, consulting company, and BC Hydro, like utility providers.
Great, and have you gotten to work out a plan of how you will report this back to council as well as the wider community? It's funny, when I was reading the report, I've seen that 2030 target so many times. But I was like, wow, 2030, like that is not far. So, I think it's something we're gonna want to be getting fairly regular updates on. I'm just wondering what you think that looks like.
Yeah, if I can take that on. We certainly do envision updating council, likely at least twice a year, on the work that we are doing. You've heard from Sam, there's a lot of short-term work that is going on in converting buildings, starting with LEDs, but what hasn't been shared, but Michael Millward here could explain, every time we're replacing an HVAC unit, for instance, we're able to harness grant funding and increase the efficiency of those units, so there is a big story to tell. We're aware of that, and we will be coming back. In terms of how recommendations are made, we'll certainly be bringing a package of information to council at the appropriate time, and it's likely early in 2025. And knowing that Mr. Gu has a lot of work here to get the work to understand what a strategic energy management plan looks like for the city. So early in 2025 is where we're anticipating a bigger piece of information and workshop session in council. As you heard, for instance, on the Maple Ridge Business Center LED lighting upgrades, you heard from Mr. Gu, it's $140,000 of capital investment that saves $10,000 a year. BC Hydro funds $40,000, so it's a 10-year return on investment. We are going to want to check in with council on how aggressive we go. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this today. This makes my heart happy, not just on the environmental side, but on the dollar side. And of course, Councilor Doak will know this when we're talking about the school district too. The school district embarked on this about, oh my goodness, 6-7 years ago. And brought in an energy consultant again. BC Hydro and Terracin have some amazing grants out there, and so it's very similar. BC Hydro funded a program, and through the changes again, lots of grants for even the capital investments. And then mind you, the school district has many more facilities than we do, but I think near the end, once it was implemented, we were saving almost $800,000 a year, if not close to $1 million. So the capital that we were putting in was well worth the capital, because not only were you obviously making an impact in a positive way on the climate, but just the dollars that we were saving. And $1 million a year can be reinvested. I mean, that's a lot of staff. That's a lot of buildings. So this is really great to see, and it's something I talked about in the campaign 2 years ago. So I'm really excited for your work. I'm really excited to see how it shifts, and I do feel like right now it's a $10,000 savings, but I feel like the energy costs are going to go up, and so I think the gap is going to widen.
Exactly.
And we're going to save considerably more than we would have if we hadn't made the investment. So great to see this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
9 years ago. 9 years ago.
9 years ago, yeah, I was gonna say it was right when I first got, right at the beginning.
Question. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing none. Thank you for your presentation. Welcome aboard to the team. We expect big things.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Okay.
I know that because it's 7 years ago.